Bonjour, je m'appelle Kirk Morrison et je viens de Calgary. Tout d'abord, merci à Laura, David et Christina de m'avoir invité ici aujourd'hui et à Anne-Marie et l'équipe EY pour l'accueil. Parce que mon français n'est pas aussi bon que celui de Laura. Et pour que j'ai terminé à temps pour notre déjeuner, il est temps de passer à l'anglais. So anyway, thanks so much, Laura, David, and Christina for having me here today, and to Anne-Marie and the team for hosting. We're gonna try that.
Let's give this a try. A little bit easier.
Let's see.
How's that? Is that okay? Everyone can hear that? Okay, so again, thanks Laura, David, and Christina for having me here today, and for Anne-Marie and the E&Y team for hosting. For the past over a year, I've been doing an evaluation. I've been evaluating the business case for the what I've called the Energy Remix in Canada. And I've done it as a self-directed research project for the CECN. And I've defined the Energy Remix. I've defined the Energy Remix as consisting of two elements. Firstly, which one's the
You can point on these.
is that right? Okay. Well, I won't, then I better not point on. So I've defined the Energy Remix as consisting of two elements: replace and restore. So replace is replacing hydrocarbons with electrons and low carbon fuels from greenhouse gas sources, with electrons produced from produced from low greenhouse gas sources as the primary energy supply going forward, with the intention of getting to net zero by 2050. And then restore is restoring hydrocarbons as a raw material for all the products, like stuff that this thing's made of, as a raw material for manufacturing products that the world needs. And that my thesis is that there's a great business in Canada of continuing to produce hydrocarbons, maybe produce even more, but use a heck of a lot fewer of them for making energy going forward, and then make products out of the ones that aren't used. So why am I doing it? Like Anne-Marie said, I'm an engineer and I've been working in the business for over 40 years, designing and constructing energy and resource projects across, I think, 6 different continents. I think the only one we haven't worked in is the Antarctica. So personally, that myself and my teams, we've permitted, managed, and designed and constructed renewables projects, like Anne-Marie said, in excess of 6,000 megawatts. And then we've done oil and gas projects for over 1 million that process or transmit over 1 million barrels a day. Like we designed, our company, we designed the Canadian portion of Keystone and Keystone XL. But then we've also done wind, we've done solar storage, we've done hydro in Nepal, energy transmission in Nepal. So like through all of this, I've seen a lot of stuff get built around the world. And my conclusion is that Canadians and the Canadian energy industry, we develop and produce all forms of energy and resources as well as sustainably as anyone. And so I think we've got a lot to offer both domestically and in the export market. So you'd think if we're that good at it, you'd think that the remix should be a good thing for both us and the rest of the world. However, like somehow it's become a very divisive issue. And the division, in my opinion anyway, is distracting us from moving ahead and realizing the benefits that it offers. And again, in my opinion, the division is all about hydrocarbons versus renewables. The source of this division is the perception that the remix creates a winner, renewable energy, and then a loser, hydrocarbons. And so regionally it it pits the hydrocarbon producing provinces against the rest of the country. And I don't think it needs to be like this. Back in grade 11, and I was mentioning there, I went to high school here on the West Island at John Rennie. Now it was it was almost 50 years ago, but it was on at John Rennie High School in the West Island in Point Claire. And I had this, my science teacher was this fellow, Mr. Semenu, and he taught us that energy, it's not molecules, it's not electrons, it's simply the ability to do work. And then this was reinforced in grade 13. My dad moved us back to Ontario, and for grade 13, I had this teacher, Mr. Weaver, and he said the same thing. Energy, it's not molecules or electrons, it's the ability to do work. And then finally, I went to University of Waterloo, and my second year thermodynamics, I was a civil engineer, we had to take one thermodynamics course, and this guy, Professor Uni taught it, and he said the same thing. So to me, it would be great to see the energy discussion shifted to outcomes, specifically environmental protection, reliability, and economics, from the absolutes on how it's generated. So I'm really hoping that if we can demonstrate that developing our energy and our resources is good for both Canada and the global environment, it could be a unifying opportunity for Canada. So what am I doing? What's my project here? For all the talk about, we hear lots about the energy remix driving the economy going forward. For all the talk, I'd never seen any concise report or a study which demonstrated that it actually makes sense from a business perspective. So intuitively, you'd think that spending trillions of dollars on infrastructure globally over the next 30 years would be positive for the economy. But for those of us who have been in projects, you know that simply spending dollars doesn't always guarantee a good outcome. I think those of us who have been in industry, we've seen bad projects. And to be successful projects, you need capacity and expertise to do the work. You got to have a source of capital. The projects have to be profitable, and they have to generate a cash flow. So my project here is really, it's a very holistic but simple business analysis of the energy remix. And I've answered the following 5 questions. So the first question is, what infrastructure is required to get to net zero by 2050? So what do we got to do between now and 2050 to get to net zero? Does it make sense? Second question, does it make sense to use the hydrocarbons that we're not going to use for energy? Does it make sense to use them for something else? Thirdly, are we positioned to do all this work? Fourthly, what's everybody thinking of? We may have lofty ambitions, what we want to do, but what's everybody thinking? Are they planning? Is anyone planning to do this? And then finally, from a business perspective, does it make sense? So I guess the next question is, why am I doing it? I'll take that one back. First, I was going to talk about why am I doing it through the CECN? Like up until about a year and a half ago, I had never heard of the CECN. I'd heard of Dave Millia, but I didn't know he was associated with the CECN. So I was going to, like I said, I retired from Stantec. My plan was to retire from Stantec the end of 2020 and do this project. I was going to do it through a university. I talked to my old alma mater, and I was looking at doing it as a postgraduate thesis. Anyway, my old board chair said to me, "You should meet Dave Millia about," and so I did. Dave, we had breakfast down at the Petroleum Club in Calgary, and we talked, and I was very aligned with the mission and vision of the organization, because I thought it meshed well with this. It was that this could be a unifying opportunity as opposed to a divisive opportunity. So anyway, we decided that we were going to do it as a self-directed research project. So here I am. Now, Dave is a very good project manager, and I thought this would be easy. I'm doing it through a nonprofit. It'd be a lot easier than doing it through a school. But Dave's a very good project manager, and he was very intense about saying what's the scope and what's out of scope. So I'm going to focus on infrastructure. Things that are out of scope in my project were like manufacturing facilities. Like I'm not going to I'm not going to look at what's involved in manufacturing EVs or solar panels or batteries, that stuff. I'm not going to talk about, and Jasmine and Justin, we talked a lot about geothermal last night. I'm only going to talk about infrastructure. I'm not going to talk about infrastructure beyond delivered energy. So I don't get into waste to heat recovery. I don't get into geothermal. I look at the electricity required to drive the heat pumps and that, but I don't get into the actual heat pumps. And then I don't get into ESG considerations, which is very important in all this. Okay, so what did I do? So first of all, I did a review of the Canadian energy system. Like I looked at what does the Canadian energy system look like, and how does it measure up to other countries. The next thing I did is I went and asked, remember that question, what's everybody thinking of doing? There's all this work to do. So I did a survey. I surveyed 69 governments. I surveyed the feds, all the provinces and territories, and municipalities over 100,000 people. I sent them a survey form and asked them, what are you planning on doing? Surveyed 46, and I also asked them, how much money are you going to put into this? Then I surveyed 46 energy companies across the country. And again, I asked them, what are your plans and how much are you thinking of investing? Then we did 174 financial institutions. So we did banks, pension funds, private equity, venture capital. And the question to them was, how much capital are you going to put up? And what form is it going to be? Is it going to be equity? Is it going to be debt? And then we did the same with a bunch of NGOs. Then once we'd done that, then we put together a plan, a plan for replace and a plan for restore. So we said, what infrastructure needs to get built by 2050 to get to net zero? And we costed it out. We did the same for restore. And we looked at what facilities, what infrastructure needs to get built to process all those hydrocarbons that we're not going to use for energy anymore. What facilities would need to get built? How much is it going to cost? And the assumption there is that we would maintain oil and gas production at 2022 levels. So we'd still produce as much, but we would use very little. And I'll show you how much we would use how much we would use to make products out of. It's a lot. And then we did a bunch of analysis. I did some internal rate of return calculations on some kind of broad categories of projects. And I wrote a report, which was just finished, and then I did a peer review. And the peer review had two stages. First, it was a formal one with Dave and the Canadian Energy and Climate Nexus, so technical review that. And then I did a real peer review. I went golfing. And my younger son, I've got two sons. My younger son's a land surveyor, and he started his degree at University of New Brunswick about 10 years ago and didn't finish. He's been working since then. And he said, Dad, I'm going to go back and finish my degree. So we drove back, and we're both avid golfers. And so we played golf along the way, and I'll talk about that at the end. But we took the opportunity to talk to the people we played golf with, most of whom we had never met before. And we talked to them, we bought them lunch. Well, actually, Dave bought them lunch or bought them a beer after. And we talked about energy and climate and what they thought about. And we went through what I'd done here, and we talked about it and got their reaction on it. So I thought that was a real peer review of just random Canadians who had met across the country. Okay, so what did we find? What did we find? So here are the intentions. So remember, we did a survey. We surveyed all the, we did a big survey. So we surveyed, like I said, we surveyed 69 government bodies, 46 energy companies, 12 NGOs, 174 financial institutions. So we sent out over 300 surveys. We got responses back from about a third of them, which I thought was pretty good. Most of the responses, like I asked some very specific questions about how much money you're going to spend, what are you going to do? Most of them said, oh, well, we don't really know. But the survey was a good vehicle in which to have a conversation. So the survey usually led up to a follow-up meeting to talk about specific plans. And here's what we found. So the governments, the general intent, remember about half the governments responded. The general intention is that to get to net zero by 2050 within their jurisdiction. The majority of the governments had a comprehensive costed plan prepared on how they're going to get to 2050. So it was very like about half of them had done that. At the same time, very few of them had done work on assessing the technical capacity to do that work, or and even fewer of them had done an assessment of the financial capacity to do the work. And then very rarely did they have any focus on exporting. Industry, on the other hand, I asked, how much work are you going to do? And so and based on what I've found in this table here, I won't go through it all, but for clean generation, hydro, solar, wind, biomass, hydrogen production, RNG production, biofuel production, energy storage, CCS development, etc., energy and EV charging stations, we came up with estimates of how much work everybody thinks they're going to do on an annual basis. And pay attention to one number here, the RNG production. Everyone remember that? What does it say? 55 petajoules per year. The industry thinks they're going to build 55 petajoules per year of RNG production. So keep that one in mind. Okay. Then now that was for replace. For restore, government intentions, less than 3% of the jurisdictions were even thinking about it. Now, remember, I don't know if you caught the number, I got 34 responses back from the government, and I said less than 3%. So only one of so 3%, 34, there's one of 34 is 3%. So only one government agency had anything resembling a plan about restore. And that was City of Edmonton up in the Alberta Industrial Heartland. Nobody else had any intentions of it. And there was no work done assessing either the technical or financial capacity to implement it. Industry intentions on restore, again, very limited. Projects producing about 1,400 tons per day of petroleum products are contemplated, but there's a significant number of projects that are totally unfinanced, have no backing. They're in planning and development, which is significant, 37,000 tons a day. So remember that number too. So there's very limited work actually going on. There's lots of talk, but none of it's financed. Financing intentions. This is from a combination of government and the financial industry. You can see here, if you can read, that looks like the old computer printout fonts from my Watt 4 days at University of Waterloo. But anyway, what that says is for replace, the intentions are between financial industry and government is that they think they're going to put $17 billion a year of equity into the replace work and $60 billion a year of debt. And that's a compilation of all those 174 institutions I surveyed. On the restore side, much different. Only 1.2 billion in equity and 2.9 billion per year in debt. So big focus on replace, very limited focus on restore. Interestingly, the internal rate of return expectations go anywhere from 6% to greater than 20%. So you can see greater than 20%, that's private equity and venture capital. That's what they're looking for in terms of returns out of these projects. Okay, so then the next thing, then I'm going to talk about the Canada's energy system. What did I find after reviewing it? So what did I find? Needless, and probably in this room, I don't need to go into this in much detail, but Canada is a big energy producer. We're the 5th biggest producer in the world. We're the 4th biggest exporter in the world, the only exporter in the G7. All the other G7 countries are importers. We are the 4th largest user of renewable energy in the world. And renewable energy is hydro, wind, solar, and biomass. We're the 4th largest user in the world. When you add nuclear in there, we're number 3 in the G7 and number 4 in the G20. So from a clean energy perspective, number 3 in the G7, number 4 in the G20. Our emissions on an aggregate basis, when you lump it all together, we have our energy has very low emissions. I put the numbers up there, 0.14 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour versus 0.18 in the G7 and 0.21 in the G20 and globally. And we're number 2 in G7, like France is number 1, and France is number 1 because they're all nukes, right? They're all nuclear. And number 3 in the G20, France number 1 and Brazil is number 2, and Brazil's number 2, why? Hydro and biomass, yeah. This is on the production side of things. So number 5, largest, 5th largest producer, 5th largest exporter, 2nd largest producer of hydropower, 4th largest producer of natural gas, 5th largest producer of crude oil, 6th largest producer of nuclear, 7th of renewables, and 9th largest producer of wind. This is well, I thought it's kind of a busy table, but I thought it was an interesting slide. This looks at how much renewable energy countries produce on a per capita basis. So the right column there is renewables production on a per capita basis. So you can see in the G7, Canada produces at least 3 times more renewable energy per capita than any other country there. Okay. So a big renewable producer. Okay, this I debated Christine about pulling this one out. I was worried about this coming into an accounting office and talking about this because this is a consumption-based accounting. So this is basically CO2 emissions adjusted for trade. So along the vertical axis is the amount of CO2 that's produced, and and then along the bottom are all the G7 countries. So Canada is the only country that is on a trade basis is neither an importer or exporter. All the other G7 countries import a bunch of emissions with the products that they procure from overseas. So we could spend the whole time talking about this, and I'm not sure if it's totally relevant, but it makes us different than the rest of the G7 countries. Like you'll see, the United States, 40%, if they included emissions which they import and all the goods they bring in, their emissions would go up by 40%. Canada's would remain the same. Okay, and then finally, Canada, significant manufacturer of oil and gas related products. 21% of every crude oil barrel is used for making products, not for energy. So it's made for physically making products. We're a top 10 global producer of hydrogen, a top number 8 in the world in biofuels, and 10% of the greater than 10% of the global carbon capture and storage capacity is right here in Canada. Okay, so I guess what does all this mean is that, first of all, Canada is a big clean energy producer. We're a big energy exporter. We're a big petroleum product manufacturer, and we produce all of this with a relatively low emissions intensity. So big producer, big exporter, big manufacturer, and the stuff we produce has fairly low emissions intensity. So what does the world need? The world needs clean energy. The world needs petroleum products, and the world needs low emissions. So it would seem on a macro scale that we should be aligned, and it's an opportunity. Okay, so then the next thing I did is develop the plan for how we're going to get to net zero. So the plan had 3 elements to it. And this is a plan which I mentioned was modeled after that Professor Meadowcroft out of Carleton. But basically, there's 3 elements to getting net zero. There's electrification, so we finish decarbonizing the grid, bring in new supply because electricity demand is going to go up by a lot. develop a whole bunch of clean fuels facilities, so specifically renewable natural gas, hydrogen, and biofuels, and then develop a bit of carbon capture and storage. So that is the replace plan to get to net zero by 2050. Do these three things: electrify, develop clean fuels, and do a little bit of carbon capture and storage. Okay, so here's the numbers for all the accountants and engineers in the room. Electrification, so new generation to finish replacing coal and natural gas out of the grid, need to develop 12 gigawatts power. To match the new demand, so new demand when people charging EVs and all that, we need to develop 73 gigawatts. So total between now and 2050, we need to develop 85 gigawatts of new generation. So over 28 years, it's about 3 gigawatts a year. Okay, 3 gigawatts. So energy developers, there's your opportunity, right? 3 gigawatts a year. Okay, storage. We're bringing lots of renewables on, so we need storage. So I assumed we need 4 hours of storage for all the new generation. That equates to 340 gigawatt hours of storage. You got to do 12 gigawatt hours of storage every year between now and 2050. That's a lot of storage. Grid upgrade. Grid, I think we got to do 5,000 kilometers a year of transmission and distribution upgrades, and that includes microgrids. And we need to do an east-west interprovincial tie line connecting East Coast to West Coast. Like, we are connected well north-south, but we are not connected well east-west. So I included the cost to do a east-west interprovincial HVDC line. And then I figured we need to do 15,000 EV charging stations every year for the next 28 years. So 1,000 DC stations and 14,000 level two stations. On the clean fuels side, I assumed on RNG, we're going to displace 15% of the natural gas in the distribution system. So that amounts to about 20 petajoules per year. Hydrogen, per the Enercan's Canada Hydrogen Strategy, they say that hydrogen is going to deliver 30% of the total energy supply going forward. So that's 20 megatons per year of hydrogen. That's a lot of hydrogen. Currently, we produce about 3, so we got to add 17 megatons of hydrogen. Biofuels, we said we need to get, by 2050, we need to produce 18,000 million liters of biofuels a day. Currently, we produce 3,000, so we need to add 15,000. And that's 535 million liters a year annually for the next 28 years. Carbon capture, this is not, I got some busy slides in here, I'm sorry, but anyway, I found this one kind of interesting, because this is what the energy system looks like. Right now, Canada consumes just over 14,000 petajoules per year. Just under 10,000 are provided by hydrocarbons. So that 9650, that's the amount that's provided from hydrocarbons. So the plan I had, I replaced 2,680 of those through electrification, through new generation. I replaced 2,840 of those through hydrogen, just over 600 from renewable natural gas, 720 from biofuels. And so we replaced almost 7,000 petajoules per year of energy supplied from hydrocarbons. So we're left in 2050, instead of supplying 9,650 per year from hydrocarbons, it'll be down to 2,774. And then based on that, we costed in CCS facilities to capture the emissions from that. And that amounted to about, each year you got to bring on 6.9 megatons of CO2 storage per year, which is a lot. I know, sorry for all the numbers, but I think this puts into perspective where all the emissions, where all the hydrocarbons are replacing. And you can see it's replacing a lot of them. Okay, so what does all this cost? Well, there it is. Each year, you got to spend $62.9 billion between now and each year between now and 2050. So the total cost of that is just under $1.8 trillion. That bottom line there, was $1.761 trillion, but that's the capital investment required to get to net zero on the infrastructure side of things. Okay, so now here's what everybody's planning on doing. And you can see, with the exception, remember, what was the one number I asked you to remember? RNG. So with the exception of RNG, everything else, no one's even thinking about anything close to what we need to do. So you can see on clean generation, industry intentions right now are to do 1 gigawatt per year. We need to do 3. Hydrogen intentions are to do 0.3 megatons a year. We're doing 0.6. Get down to EV charging stations. We need to do 15,000 a year. We're doing about 1,000. So everywhere there's a big gap except on RNG. There are a lot of RNG projects around right now. And why is that? It's because RNG, you can sell it, like you can get it into the gas system. And like in British Columbia, you can charge a lot of money to put it into the system. So that's why there's all sorts of interest in RNG. The one flag I have is I would say there's lots of interest in RNG and biofuels. And to me, that creates sort of the competing interest of, you know, a lot of the RNG being proposed in BC anyway is from wood, is from, you know, deforestation and that. So anyway, that creates a whole another issue. But anyway, the moral is, with the exception of RNG, is the intentions of industry are nowhere close to the amount that we would need to do. Okay. On the financial side, adding up how much money governments and the financial industry are thinking of, or how much capital they're thinking of providing, it's not too bad. You see the government, the government, best I can ascertain, the government's looking to put up about $3 billion a year in equity or grants into projects. Not a lot of debt. The debt from the government comes through Canada Infrastructure Bank, and it's in that second column there. Financial industry probably looking to put 14 billion in equity and 60 billion in debt. And so overall, it's not too bad. There appears to be lots of money there, which I think makes a lot of sense. My experience, I'm involved in 2 companies right now doing green energy developments, and there is lots of money available if you've got an offtake agreement, if you've sold the product, the electrons or molecules. And if you've got regulatory, if you got regulatory approval, if you got permits. So there is lots of money if you've got those 2 things. But where there isn't money, it's in that initial row there. There isn't a lot of equity available for projects that are still in the development phase. And so so my conclusion of this is there's lots of money around. Everyone wants to give, if you've got offtake and you got permits, everybody wants to give you money. If you're in startup mode, no, because it's a little riskier. So I would say, I'm jumping ahead to conclusions, but I would say if there's an opportunity for governments, it's to look at that. How can we get more startup company in there, startup money in? Okay, now the restore plan, and I'm going to put up, you thought some of those slides were bad. I'm going to put up 2 terrible slides right now. The first slide, my colleague Dean Robertson at Stantec gave me this. This is all the stuff you can make out of natural gas in one page. There's a whole pile of stuff there. That's all the products you can make out of natural gas. He gave me another even worse slide for crude oil. There's all the stuff you can make out of crude oil. Like, the opportunities are countless. But for the purpose of this project, I looked at sort of the building blocks for products. These 7 different building blocks: ethylene, propylene, benzene, toluene, xylene, methanol, and ammonia. And so that's what I really based my analysis on. What these sorts of projects. Okay, so I mentioned that 21%, you know, is there the opportunity to use up all the hydrocarbons? Well, I mentioned 21% of crude oil production is currently used as a component in manufacturing products. Okay, so 21% of a barrel of oil doesn't get used for energy, it's used for products. Demand for those things is increasing 4% a year. So if my math's right, in 40 years, 100% of our current production could be used for making stuff, with none of it used for energy, just responding to demand. So remember I said we were going to, on that other busy slide, I said we were going to replace just under 7,000 petajoules a year of hydrocarbons, take those out of the supply chain for making energy. So to take those things and process them into products, each year we would have to build facilities that could handle 111,000 barrels a day of crude, 266 million standard cubic feet per day of natural gas, and you generate 20,000 tons a day of products out of that each year. And the capital cost of doing that is about $58 billion a year, or another $1.6 trillion. So replace and restore, remember replace was 1.8 trillion. Restore would be 1.6 trillion, so total of 3.4 trillion. Now, what's everybody thinking? Remember, our industry intentions were to spend $4 billion a year and make 1,400 tons of products. The opportunity is to spend 58 and make 20,000. Okay. So the intentions are nowhere close to what the potential is. And then here, as far as financing, you see there's on the right side is how much money we need to do it, $58 billion. Currently, the government have no real intentions of providing dollars to the projects, not appreciable anyways. Industry is probably about 4 billion, so there's a huge gap in financial capacity to do those projects. Okay, so does it all make sense? First of all, more than sufficient renewable energy is available to develop to achieve 2050 net zero objectives. There is more capacity to develop projects than there is need. So creates an export opportunity. The hydrocarbons replaced by renewable energy can be developed into petroleum products. So that's 6,800, just going back to here. That's 6,876 petajoules per year we take out of the supply chain. It can be used to make products that there is a market for. So again, an export opportunity. Okay, from a capacity perspective, recall I said that it was going to take, so on the replace side, it was $63 billion a year. Restore, it was $58 billion a year. The total amount of work that would need to be done is $120 billion a year. Industry is only intending to do 20 of that, 22 of that. So there appears to be a big gap. But historically, if you look at the Canadian energy and resource sector, you look at all the work that's done in the Canadian energy and resource sector over the, from 2007 to 2019, the sector did 50 billion a year to 120 billion a year. The 120 billion was in the heydays. Laura will remember the heydays of in Alberta in 2013, 2012, when projects were really going. But historically, the industry's done 120 billion. How much do we need to do? 120 billion. So the capacity should be there to do it. Let's see. Now, does it all make sense? Are the dollars there for it? Well, I think we can see, we talked about before, the dollars appear to be there for replace projects. Replace projects, there appears to be dollars. We probably probably nominal shortage of equity for replace projects. But there's lots of debt. But for restore projects, there needs to be more focus on it. Then I mentioned I'd done some kind of high-level internal rate of return analysis. And so what I found is that the projects typically generate rates of return of exceeding 6%, but not 15% at current commodity prices. And remember I said investors were looking for 6 to greater than 20%. So typically the projects at current commodity prices generate kind of a 6 to 15% internal rate of return. Certainly increasing the carbon tax improves that. The exception being CCS, is carbon capture and storage, there is no clear line of sight to offsetting revenues for, carbon capture and storage are challenged right now. If revenue was available from carbon credits. Internal rate of returns of 16 to 15% are achievable at carbon prices of $100 to $185 a ton. But overall, the projects, they make sense, and as carbon prices increase more, they will make more sense. So what are the barriers to doing more replace projects? Certainly access to initial development capital, the rate of return, which is affected by carbon price, and regulatory risk. Those are the three big barriers to it. And the access to initial development capital and regulatory risk, that would be I think the one opportunity that we've got to really kickstart things. For restore projects, the barrier is no one's thinking about or talking about it. Or I shouldn't say no one, but the level of dialogue and engagement isn't anywhere close to what it is for replace. Additional export opportunities, replace, like there's lots of them. The power grid and the natural gas pipeline system is well integrated with the United States. And beyond that, there are opportunities for transcontinental high HVDC lines, like connecting North America to Asia across the north. And there's opportunities for marine terminals. And then on the restore side, there's opportunities to respond to that global demand for petroleum products. Okay, so that's my conclusion. Overall, I think the thing makes sense. We've got the capacity to do it, we've got the expertise, and it is, when you get down to the fundamental economics, it's a good business. So anyway, I mentioned that I went on a golf tour to talk. After David did the review of my report, I went on a golf tour to talk about it. So my son and I, that's my son Andrew, the guy with the beard there, the surveyor, we played 16 courses in 9 provinces. We missed Newfoundland. We couldn't get to Newfoundland. We couldn't get to the territories. Played 16 courses, 9 provinces, 3.5 weeks. We took in 2 baseball games. We went to a Jays game in Toronto. And then interesting, my older son was playing out in Sydney in the Canadian Senior Men's. So we went and saw him too. And we talked to over 50 Canadians about across the country about energy and climate. And so what did we hear? What did we hear? First of all, everybody was worried. Everybody was worried. And what were they worried about? You know, and this isn't I didn't do a statistical or scientific analysis on this, but everybody was worried about, and it was one of 3 things. First of all, impacts on future generations of climate change. And that was across the board, older people to younger people. So big worry about climate impacts. The other worry was about turning our energy infrastructure upside down and being left with a less reliable and more expensive system. That was a big worry. And then the final one, which I thought came up more than once, was worry about the ability of governments to steer a long-term program. The comment was, governments are good at responding to short-term crisis. When you got to fix something, because governments have a short-term window, but concern about the ability of them to steer a long-term program. So we heard that. We also heard, without exception, we heard the energy remix is viewed as an opportunity. Everybody said this. We've got an abundance. We realize we got an abundance of resources. So develop and export them. They also said our workforce is skilled. And I thought this came up more than a few times, is they thought the opportunity, we've got all this aging infrastructure. The opportunity to upgrade as we upgrade well with the thesis is this is an opportunity for us. So conclusion is, we should move forward and get on with things. Energy, products, sell it domestically and abroad. So instead of arguing about it or bagging everybody, move forward with it. And then the other thing I detected, and maybe it was the environment, maybe it's because we were on a golf course or drinking beer after eating lunch, but I detected respect for all parts of the industry across the country. It didn't matter where we were. Like everybody appreciated and thought that our industry was was good at what we do. So that's the end of the technical side of things. I did a top 10 list. Andy and I did a top 10 list from all our stuff. We said and here it is. The best pub was the Jasper Lounge in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, the oldest pub in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan got a second one. Best beer was the Swift Current Brewing Company. The best highways. It wasn't Quebec. It was best highways were in New Brunswick, close second in Nova Scotia. The highways there were good. So they've been doing something during the COVID years for sure. Friendliest golf course was right here, Club de Golf Saint-Simon in Simon-de-Bagot. A little wee course, but they were so welcoming. The other thing I learned about all this is my son, Andy, he did French immersion all through school and, you know, from kindergarten to grade 12. And I'd never heard him speak French before. I didn't think he could. But he came through after being out of it for years. So there's a plug for French immersion. But friendliest golf course by far, Club de Golf Saint-Simon. Toughest greens, Crowbush and PEI, and then we played a couple of really good courses, Crowbush and the National in Woodbridge, which is tough to get on, and those were tough greens. Thickest rough by far, we played two out in Cape Breton Island, and it had been raining there all month, and then the sun came out, so the rough was the thickest in Cape Breton. No one was close. The most memorable golf hole. And this is a good story. I play at kind of a nice club in Calgary, and they got us on a swanky course in Winnipeg. I won't say who the name was. They got us on, and like we told them we were doing this project, and they said, well, you can come and play, but you can't talk about your project to anybody. So that was kind of the only real negative reaction I had. They said, yeah, I come out and play, but don't talk about energy and climate with our people. There's, that. So anyway, we said, forget that, screw you. We went and played at this course, the Kildonan Golf Club in Winnipeg. And we did our interview with the guy who worked at Golf Town down the street. But anyway, this was the most memorable hole because this was a par 3, the 10th hole, you hit over a railroad bridge to the green. So the railroad bridge is the other side of that. They're about 150 yards, and that was by far the most memorable hole. And Andy and I, we both hit the green. Best deal. There's this place in New Waterford, Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Island, the Rack and Roll. It's a pool hall and bar. I got chicken wings for $7.99, a schooner of beer for $3.50. It was the best deal going on. Close tie for second. We had free burgers and fries from Baseball Canada in Sydney, and then Looney Dogs at the Jays Dame. And the Looney Dogs, you really get a hot dog for $1, but you kind of pay for what you got there. They were, yeah. Best outdoor patio, Trois Rivières for sure. The whole downtown core was great. We did spend a whole day there. And finally, the best story, you can't see that, but in Sault Ste. Marie, we played golf with this fellow, John Davison, who's an old retired OPP from Hornpain. And I don't know, most of you here, well, some of you might remember the movie Slapshot. It's a story about the worst aspects of hockey. Anyway, if you remember that, there was the goon on the other team was a guy named Ogie Oglethorpe, who actually came from Hornpain, Ontario. And John Davison, the policeman, got in a fight with him and won and put him in jail. So that was the best story. So anyway, I don't know, Dave, how did I do on time? I'm done. So
you should mention that all these presentations will be available digitally. So
yeah. Yes, David asked me to remind everybody that all the presentation materials are available for distribution here. And just don't look too closely at that chart on the consumption-based accounting. I didn't make it up. I just found it and put it in. And I thought it was interesting. So, question. It will be. Yeah, we're in the final throes of editing, and so. David. Oh, sorry. Question was, is the report available? And the answer is yes, it should be done quite soon. We're in the final 2.5 weeks. We heard it here. Okay. Okay. Yes.
You mentioned consumption once only, but you forgot to mention that Canada is as a whole per capita, like on the top of the list of consumption per capita. And I'm surprised that you don't mention there's an opportunity here to actually reduce our consumption, since we see richer countries using less energy and being richer than us. So
Yeah.
you want us to remain poor?
No, and that's a good, we probably could have put that. The question was, it didn't talk about consumption much, that there, and agreed, there is a big opportunity to reduce consumption. The project I did, I just looked at the whole, like I had to put some boundaries around it. I had to come up with a plan. And the plan was, consumption stays the same. And so we came up with a plan that seems to make sense with consumption remaining the same. Consumption dropping, I think, would only make that even stronger. So I agree. Like I assumed, if you remember that busy chart, I assumed that in 2050, energy demand is going to be the same as it is today. Probably not a good assumption, although if population goes up, maybe it is. But anyway, those were the boundaries you put on the study. Yeah. We'll go there.
Talked about consumption of durable goods and different goods that would require these petroleum products and inputs, about going up 4% a year. That's globally across the
Yes.
earth.
Yes.
Okay, so then how would we stack up if our production of petroleum, frankly, from what I understand, is more expensive than some of our competitors? So you're talking about Saudi Arabia or different producers, like, how are we going to stack up against them? Are they investing in stuff like this right now?
Yeah. So the question was, can our petroleum product compete globally against the other petroleum producers? And so I guess my answer would be, is we are competing well right now, because I think it is 70% of our, I might get these reduced to, I might get them reversed, but I think it's 70% of our crude oil is exported right now, and 50% of our natural gas. So we are already competing in that export market. So I would say we're competitive now. Is everybody else's costs gonna, the big question is are we all playing on a level playing field? But we are competing right now. Now, our big customer is the States, is America, but can we process, like America, they generate way more petroleum products than we do because they focused on it more. Like if you ever go down to Houston, Louisiana, that whole Gulf is petroleum product manufacturing. Okay.
Are our competitors investing in this type of restoration, the process of restoring?
I think the Chinese are, for sure. I think the Chinese, and that's, I've got to admit, the Chinese probably influenced that whole restore side of my project, because we've done some projects in China and we saw that focus on like China is very aligned with reducing hydrocarbon usage for energy. Like they really are. But they say they have a couple of caveats. They say we're doing that because it's good for the environment, but also they don't think they can afford to waste them too, because they need to make stuff. So a lot of the motivation for this project came out of just interface with China. Okay. There was another question. Yeah.
Yeah, the hydrogen, your table for replacement of hydrocarbon.
Yes.
Hydrogen, if there's no source of hydrogen, it must come from renewable electricity or carbon capture. If you want to do a green hydrogens, I'm just wondering if this was part. I see hydrogen as a subset of carbon capture or electricity. I don't know if it was the case in the table.
We looked at we looked at, so the question was on hydrogen is where, if I'm saying, where is the hydrogen coming from? Is it gray? Is it blue? Is it turquoise? Is it green? Yeah. So I took the Canada strategy, Canada hydrogen strategy, where they said 30% of delivered energy is going to be hydrogen. And so then I said, okay, what's a typical hydrogen plant cost? And there isn't typical. So it's probably an average of green versus blue versus turquoise, and pushed that all together. That's how I came up with the number. So most of the, like in Alberta right now, most of the hydrogen projects contemplated there are making it a natural gas. You know, your project here is a green hydrogen project. I think there's probably good interest, like green hydrogen, I think can make sense where here, because your power is so reliable and inexpensive. Manitoba is the same situation. BC is the same situation. Lots of water, lots of cheap power. The challenge I've seen within BC, BC for sure, is that the actual generation cost is low, but the transmission costs are like off the planet, and that's the challenge part there. But I think in Alberta, we think in Alberta that Alberta's got cheap renewable energy. Like last year, 60% of the renewables that came on in Canada came on in Alberta. Like Alberta's got, if you've ever been there, anyone been to Pincher Creek in Alberta? Or like it's the windiest place on the planet. Alberta has a huge wind resource, and you can develop like wind, you know, our auctions at the equivalent of the ISO, you know, we've been getting it for, you know, 4.7 cents around there, 4 cents for wind, and solar's not far behind. So question over there.
Will never achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 economy-wide.
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
See if the numbers for a restore plan includes like measures for decarbonization of restore plan. Because only by doing the first replacement, never by 2050 will be carbon neutral economy-wide.
Yeah.
Unless you consider policy.
I looked at the emissions profile the way we are now. I said we're using this much energy, and the emissions from this much energy are this. Then I said, okay, we're going to use the same amount of energy in 2050, and we've pulled a bunch of hydrocarbons out of the system. Those hydrocarbons that we pulled out of the system will have more emissions. And how that's factored into it, I don't really know. But we didn't get down to that level of detail. But overall, we said the amount of energy we're going to use today is going to be the same in 2050, which I think is probably conservative. And that all that hydrocarbons that we've pulled out, we are going to get to net zero on that. So
Yeah, but I mean, process.
Yes,
Bunch of
we'll have emissions. Yeah, but we already have emissions. We're already processing that hydrocarbons right now. Like we're doing something with it, and it's emitting. So I get your point, and you know, there's lots there. And this was David's scoping of work. You had to put some goalposts around it. So that's what we came up. I don't think I totally answered your question there, but danced around a little. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yep.
Do you have any views on what some of the political obstacles or barriers might be, whether it's lack of cooperation between the different players, governments, companies, individual community groups, indigenous people, or NIMBY, one of the most powerful groups in Canada, stop many projects. So what do you think the political barrier is?
The question was, what are the political barriers? I think if we could get beyond, okay, so I'll get a bit philosophical, and then maybe I'll say something practical. I think if we could get beyond this whole idea that one form is bad, one form is good, and look at results, I think that would go a long way. But in terms of the real practical barriers, a lot of people bag the regulatory system. I find the regulatory system good, like it's thorough. It's maybe not as fast as you like, but to me, it's clear and it's well laid out. And if you know it going in, consistency is the important part. So, but you have to plan for it, and that's probably why it would be. That's why it's. I talk about the barriers to getting capital. I think the bigger barrier is getting capital, because companies want you to have or financiers want you to have permits before they'll give you enough money to do it. And so you're trying to do permits on a shoestring budget, and that doesn't help you in the whole regulatory arena there. So I think if you could get that initial chunk of capital in that would allow you to do a bang up job on your regulatory applications, is that would move things along. But yeah.
This is the case, should Canada be aware of the rising cost of the transition with the sector so it could balance from this transition?
The question was, if I got it right, is there limitations on the availabilities of metals to facilitate all this work? So the short answer is, I think a lot of the materials that are going to be used, like certainly in solar panels, and that is, we're not making those here. I'm doing solar on my house, and I'm buying mine from Korea. So are we short here? I don't believe so. I think maybe we're short globally, and I think there's probably an opportunity to develop, like where Canada's very good mining. There's probably an opportunity to develop more mineral extraction and processing. But right now, for the work we're doing, I don't see a shortage specifically in Canada, but maybe globally I do. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question on the restore concept.
Yes.
Because to me, it's really new. That's the first time I hear about it.
Mm.
How did you come up with this concept of I would say extracting the same amount of hydrocarbons in the next years?
Mm.
Is it your own concept, or is it something that you discuss at the federal level? Or?
No, and I came up with it, and I mentioned over here is it wasn't something I invented. It was really modeled after what I heard from China, is that they feel that there were two aspects to using less hydrocarbons. The first was to reduce emissions and be good for the environment, that it was, climate change was real and it was a risk. But the second one is, it was real practically, that they really felt that we can't afford to waste them. They're a finite resource, and we can't afford to waste them by burning them to make energy. So I didn't invent it. That's what I heard from them. There's a good organization called GuideCo, the Global Energy Interconnect Development Corporation, I think is the CO. And they published a paper on a report on this a number of years ago, and so that was really the genesis for that. Okay.
A quick follow-up on that. What about everything around fugitive emissions and all that stuff that is attached to extracting hydrocarbons? Anyway, even if you don't use it as an energy source.
Yeah, the question was, how do you manage fugitive emissions if you keep extracting it? And that's definitely, needs to be addressed. But I do think the industry, and I think there's Canada West Foundation have a good study that was published this year on fugitive emissions. And I think the industry has made some very good progress with it. Like, I think they've got a target and they're ahead of it right now. So fugitive emissions, it's a big deal. There's still lots to do on it for sure. But, yeah. One here.
Yeah, on the, going back to the non-energy use of hydrocarbons. You know, the largest amount of the product that we're using in the non-energy use is asphalt or roads. And I don't think by 2050, especially, you know, if we want to preserve biodiversity, that we can build enough roads around the earth, we use all the 4% growth that we're seeing.
Yeah.
So there would be limitations there. Then plastic is not big in terms of use, but still, you know, countries like Canada have an intention to ban some plastics.
Yeah.
So again, it's a market that should shrink and not grow.
Yeah.
Fertilizers, which is another big use for a non-energy use for hydrocarbons, is when you look at the agricultural emissions, we need to reduce our emissions from fertilizers.
Yes.
And again, we'll have to, if we want to reach net zero by 2050, we'll have to reduce our use of fertilizers.
Yeah.
So these are three big sectors where, you know, we cannot afford to grow by 4%. So I have a hard time, you know, as I strongly believe that there will be a market for non-energy use of hydrocarbons, but I don't see a growing market compatible with 2050 goals.
Yeah. And like, you know, it's a great point. I haven't tried to, like, this wasn't Kirk's analysis of it. I've taken a bunch of stuff, the best, latest information I could find on markets, and like those two, remember those two real busy charts of what all the stuff you can make out of it? Like, there's a lot of stuff to make, and if you go in and, you know, are the predictions right or wrong? Who knows? But I think there was enough data there that said we're going to need some of this stuff going forward. Is it going to be all of it? David.
In the study that you did, whether it's replace, restore, do you see Canada achieving 2050 net zero?
The question was brass tacks. Do I see Canada getting 2050 net zero? I don't know. I think you could. I think it's going to take a lot of will. It's going to take a lot of will and action. Do I think so? If I put my engineer's hat on, probably no. If I put my developer's hat on, which I am now, I'd say yeah. If I think everybody getting together on it, I think you could do it. How, you know, they built the CP railway, and yeah, exactly. And but you know, but I think everybody was well, I don't want to say everyone was united on doing it, but I don't know. It's but if, you know, if I had to bet on it, I would say probably, and I don't think it'd be a great bet, but I think optimistically, if we could get, I think it's just motivation, getting everybody behind it and stop arguing about it. And you know what we heard from the golfers. Where's the golfers here? We should just move forward and get on with things instead of arguing about it. And I think, like, we waste a lot of energy and probably emit a lot of emissions by arguing about it. So just get on with it and say we're going to do it. Yeah.
So is it going to be industry driven or right now in Quebec we're in a situation where we want to go too fast either because we don't want to lose people in this transition. We want to take their hands and working with them, but there's two sides of the equation too. There's people that will always think that we're not going too fast or not as fast as we want to. So can we led, industry led, or led with some more straightforward or ambitious strategy?
I think like again, from my golfers, I heard, see, that last comment was they were concerned about the abilities of governments to steer a long-term program. And so I look at just the I think from like I'm developing I'm in 2 companies right now that are developing. Our biggest obstacle is getting the capital to do it. Like, I think the projects, I think they generate decent ROIs, but getting that initial capital in to really kickstart it so you can do the regulatory work well. So I think the government's got a role. I think the government has clearly got a role in it, but I think industry, because I think it's a good business. So if it's a good business, I think it'll drive itself, but it needs a bit of help. And I don't want to say help because I don't, I think, I don't want to say handouts, Nat, but I think it needs just a little bit of push because it's a transformational time. And that the transformational time need a bit of help. Okay, so thanks very much. That was fun. Appreciate the.
Thank you, Kurt. That was really interesting. And there's so many ways to slice how you look at it. It's like pretty hard to put a nail on a target with that one. So we're gonna take a break now for a half hour. We're starting again at 12. Lunch has just been brought in. So feel free to, if you want to hang out here and network, whatever you'd like. We'll have our keynote speaker, Pierre-Olivier Pinault, starting at 12 sharp. Shifting the focus now more on Quebec and energy transition. And if you want more information or learn a little bit more about the golf tour, it is available. There's a link on the CCN website. You can read the blogs. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, so we'll see you back here in about half hour.